We are going to talk about the Josh Duggar situation, but a little bit differently than what other people are doing. I really want to talk about what I've been seeing regarding other people covering the Josh Duggar situation, because you can find information on that anywhere else. You can hear other people just regurgitating the same stuff that's going on or any new developments. And the reason I want to do this is because a lot of the channels that are talking about this are channels that I've actually mentioned on my channel or briefly touched on and touched on topics that they've touched on and given my own take on it. And so it's kind of been this topic, just like the last one I talked about, where all these different worlds that I've interacted with very recently, they're all kind of in this one story. They're all converging into one. And some of those topics and people are like the anti-family vlogging community, the anti-Katie Joy community, the legal commentary community, and also reality TV and just pop culture in general. And so, and then this also involves some commentary channels that I've touched on. And the two I want to really, I don't want to say criticize, but I'm going to kind of touch on a few things that they've said and kind of give a little bit of a different take, or maybe rebut their points or whatever you want to, whatever word you want to put in there. And those two creators are the Dad Challenge podcast, Josh, who hosts that, and radiantbritt. Now, I am aware, and I don't need to preface this by saying this, but I am aware that some of my audience, albeit smaller than theirs, crosses over into them. And so I never want to come across, even though I do touch on them and criticize both of them every once in a while, I don't ever want to come across that I am trying to convince people not to watch them, if that makes sense. Because I know some creators, they say, oh, do me a favor and don't watch these people that I'm criticizing. Don't give them the view. And I personally don't believe that, because if I'm using their content to create content of mine, whether it be taking something they've said and kind of spinning on it, or using a video idea of them and giving my own take on it, I don't think me telling you not to go watch them actually helps my point if I'm like criticizing them or rebutting something they've said or giving a different take. And so that's why on the screen you see shared here, let me make sure I can see it, you can see the name of the video. And if you are going to, if you want to fact check me, basically, you can go to their video and see what I said versus what they said and make sure I'm doing okay. Because I feel like when creators try to convince their audience or pull the wool over their eyes by saying, don't go watch this channel that I just criticized and talked about or watched the video from or reacted to, it does, as a viewer, it makes me want to go to that channel even more. So one, it doesn't work, but two, it does make me think that as a creator, you may be trying to hide something, or you may be a little insecure about your view. And although I'm not perfect and I may not be right all the time, I believe in open discussion and open free flow of ideas. And so after this, if you want to go watch those videos and make sure I'm not lying to you or whatever, I fully support that. So with that said, let's start with the Dad Challenge podcast. His name's Josh. He's on there. So I watched his video recently, which is this one right here, which is called, I guess I'll say it out loud in case someone can't see, Josh Duggar, Katie Sorensen, and the lengths people will go to for fame and money. The kids are the victims. I'm just going to touch on the Josh Duggar part of this, even though there was plenty to talk about from that whole video, but maybe I'll go into that in another one. So one of the points he made was that he thinks, or he thought that the reason that the Duggars are maybe going to get away with, or Josh is going to get away with this, or they have gotten away with past instances of him doing similar things, was because they are white, they are rich and famous, and they're Christian. And those are all three privileges that he thought they had that would potentially work in their favor and have in the past. And that could be part of the case, but from my understanding, the reason we are only seeing the indictment and the prosecution or whatever charges and arrests now is because they might have kept finding things in the investigation. Because I know I don't know everything, but what I do know about the legal system is that government lawyers are not going to bring a case that they can't easily win, if that makes sense. One, because, I mean, it's taxpayer dollars and they want to have a good record for whatever reason, whether it's promotion or just having that case in there, or that feather in their cap. And that also justice in general, from what we've learned from George Floyd's situation, where we waited almost a whole year before the trial happened for Derek Chauvin, was that justice doesn't always have a favorable timeline to people watching from the outside, or maybe even obviously people directly affected, whether it's victims or the accused. And so that doesn't necessarily equate to the gravity of the situation. And so to me and to you and to everyone, especially here in America where this case is happening and where many of you are viewing from, but like I saw earlier, some of you are from overseas and looking at America and looking at this story and what's going to happen. You never know if you or me are going to be in this situation, whether we are rightfully or wrongfully accused. But to kind of remove, how do I say this? To hold a different standard to someone because you don't like them or because you don't like what they do or what they stand for is a slippery slope, and that is very concerning to me, because although you don't like what they're doing, someone could not like what you're doing, and you can easily be in that role and not like the way you are treated. So that's why I always stand up for like an equal standard, or the same standard for everyone, whether I like someone or not. And so that was one thing I thought was very concerning about what Josh said on his video about this, but maybe it was just a little of an inflammatory comment for kind of entertainment and for drama. I don't know. But also he said that he does not think the Duggars are Christians. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, maybe they're not the perfect Christians. But then in the next sentence, Josh from Dad Challenge podcast, there's two Joshes here, so I'm trying to make sure I distinguish which is which. The next sentence, he was criticizing the siblings of Josh Duggar for still sticking by their brother because of what I perceive as the values that they grew up with, of forgiveness and believing people can kind of, whatever the religious saying is for becoming healed or changing your ways, whatever it's called, because of their religious upbringing. So I was thinking, okay, if they're not Christians, maybe they're not perfect Christians is what he meant to say, and that they look bad because they're forgiving someone, their sibling who's done something bad. That was one thing I was like, it's kind of a contradictory, and it really indicated to me that some of the reactions to the Duggar situation, this recent one, is based on more emotion than logic and reason. And obviously emotions can be used to really prove a point or get people on your side or kind of get people all riled up. But when it comes to legal things, they just want the facts, right? So I don't know. Okay, so also I saw many people, including Josh from Dad Challenge podcast, alluding to this idea that if Josh did these things in the past to his siblings and to people close to the family but outside the family, that he must be, or there's probable cause, or whatever the term you want to use, to believe that he may be doing these things to his own children. Now, I don't know the mindset of a predator or someone who may go down the path of doing something that Josh Duggar is being accused of doing or has been accused of doing. And I don't know how it differs between family and children of your own and other people's children, or whatever it is, and whatever level of relationship Josh or anyone in his state of mind has with others. But jumping to that conclusion, in my opinion, is very, very dangerous and concerning when people who have influence, and I'm saying this because I want to hold everyone to the same standard, any level of influence, whether it's you and your friend in real life or you and one person that follows you or that you follow online, to jump to that conclusion. I know it's easy to jump to that conclusion, but when I see that coming up a lot, I'm like, oh God, I don't want that to be true, obviously, because the less victims, the better. But when I see people doing that, I think that is starting to approach the line, and some may argue that's even crossing the line. So I want to make sure that I'm not doing that and that I'm calling that out, because we don't know. So there's that with Josh. Radiantbritt made a video, and hers was titled, let's go here to make sure everything's good. Hers was titled, "We Need to Discuss Katie Joy's Coverage of Josh Duggar." So this is kind of a two birds with one stone. One where I'm going to talk about Katie Joy and Radiantbritt and kind of the crossover between the two. So she said that Katie Joy may be covering or is covering this story about Josh Duggar and the Duggars in general for a payday. And I see Katie being, at least in recent memory, a Duggar-centric channel as of late. So of all people, I actually think she is the one that should get the least pushback for covering this story about Josh Duggar, because if she didn't cover this Josh Duggar story of him being arrested and charged, but covers all these other things about their parents and about their social media and speculating on their pregnancy and whatever she does with the Duggars, that would be suspect in my opinion, because it would look like she wasn't wanting to cover this story for some reason. And as we know, this type of subject matter is notorious on YouTube for being something that does get you demonetized or is kind of iffy with advertisers. And so to me, if she was doing it for a payday, meaning covering the Duggars, I think she wouldn't actually be covering the abuse stories like this. And so I get why people think her doing like 5 videos, was I think 5 videos in a 24-hour period on this Josh Duggar story alone gets people thinking she's kind of money hungry and a grab bag for a paycheck. She's just doing her job. If you're a YouTube commentary channel and you want to just go deep on one subject, you're well within your rights to do that. And so so Britt pointing out the number of videos that Katie has made on this, on top of the comments I just talked about, isn't a point for me against Katie or in support of the advocacy or the activism as far as the abuse and assault of children, if that makes sense. And so I look at it this way. Do we criticize mainstream media news organizations for covering, let's say, maybe this subject or like war where people are being killed, but then they cut to commercial break like right after the story's over? Well, no, because in order for them to get us that news, which is valuable, and for us to get information on what's going on in the world, they have to pay the bills too. And so I've personally been criticized on my channel in the comment section for bringing up Walkabout. But the reality is there is a money aspect to everything. And I know I don't like that that's always the case, but it's the reality of where we are in society. So also Britt was saying that Katie was cashing in on the Duggars and posed the question with that, should Katie be covering the story if she's not doing it from an aspect of trying to be an advocate or an activist in the name of saving the children, if you will? And I personally say no, because Katie Joy, whether you like her or not, should be able to cover any story she wants, how she wants, just like you as a creator, if you're out there, or me, or Britt, should be able to also. And not unfortunately, but the reality is Britt is also making money off this Duggar story by covering it on her channel as well. And so that was an on point, I thought, out of her video. And then also, that was kind of what I took from that comment from Radiantbritt also, was that she was basically saying that, or implying, I should say, that one should only say something in the way that she is saying it, or cover something in the way she's covering it, because if they aren't saying it in the way she does, then she thinks it's wrong or whatever. And to me, that is a very dangerous mindset, although she's entitled to have that mindset, like I said before. I think it's very dangerous because it crosses into that authoritarian side, and I personally don't think that is going to help the cause of saving the children or putting eyes and ears on the issue of assault of children or adults, whoever. And so I think even if, let's see, I have a different take on it, Katie Joy has a take, Britt has a different take, Josh and Dad Challenge podcast has a different take. The point is we're all talking about it. We're all putting attention on it. And so if we all have a little bit different takes, but we're all generally on the same side that assault of children or abuse of children is just not good, I think that's a win. And so we can all reach different people and gather more people on the same side. Same with kind of the anti-family blogging world that a lot of them kind of live into, is everyone can approach that one issue from different angles, and it should be okay because at the end of the day, their goal was the same. The problem came when some people were criticized or excommunicated from that community, not in the inner circle or whatnot, or the cool kids club, because they took a different approach to this, or they were critical of some other people's methods for approaching that goal. So that was noticed as well. And then Britt was also talking about how people were commenting on Katie's video, or in the Katie Joy Reddit subreddit, about Katie Joy calling it as far as something happening with Josh. But Britt, well, she was criticizing people for celebrating that Katie Joy was calling something like this, which is so horrific. In this same video, she was talking about her recent video on the Duggars, where she thought she had an inkling something like this was going to happen with the Duggars as well. So I'm like, okay, so you can have an inkling, and maybe people didn't praise you for it, but you had an inkling, similar way that Katie had an inkling and said something about it. But one was right and one wasn't. This is the part where the whole anti-Katie Joy community and mindset has, I think, blinded some people and has actually hurt their cause, because I don't see how those two can coexist and not hurt your side, if that makes sense. So that was an interesting note I thought of as well. And then one of the last things I remember from wrote down from Britt's video about this was that she was also saying that Katie at some point will have to move on to another family once the Duggars aren't getting her views in her. And I personally don't see how what Katie is doing is any different from what Radiant Britt is doing, or anyone else, including myself, are doing as far as following a story. And then at some point, either the story ends, or we've all moved on from it, or you don't think you have anything else to add. So I at least will give Katie Joy credit for having no shame as far as speaking her mind, albeit some things I'm like, okay, maybe you shouldn't have said that, or maybe that's a little too far, or you're asking for trouble. And at least she goes deep on one subject, even if it's the Duggars and she's done a million videos about them. But I give her that much credit, because I know if I was going that deep on them and like having sources and digging things up and analyzing every little thing about the Duggars on their social media, I personally would feel a little creepy about it. I mean, some things you kind of have to go a little deep on if you want to investigate a little bit, but I respect the hustle and respect the grind that she has. So there's that. Maybe some people won't like me for that, but those are my general thoughts for the Radiant Britt video that she did.